Hi, everyone. Today we're going to talk about the possibility of revamping the research ecosystem. So, that's a fancy word of saying, how can we improve the research process globally as well as locally? So, give me a second, and I'm going to share my slides. Essentially, what we're talking about today is for those in the know or within research spaces, you may have experienced that 2025, 2026, we're seeing a lot of stress and changes and, lack of a better term, chaos within research. Now, coming from the United States, I have a unique perspective. A lot of changes are happening within how federal government supports research with funding, as well as research missions. And even there's a strong growing anti-intellectualism and decrease in public trust when it comes to research within this country. However, and unfortunate, that is not unique to the United States. What's happening in the United States is going to repercussion into other research systems, but also even before the election of Donald Trump, we did see a growing distrust within the research ecosystem globally. It can be fueled by COVID-19 as well as just political discourse and again a growing anti-intellectualism that's happening around the globe. Now, it's easy to be doom and gloom with all this, but I'm hoping to share that this is an opportunity to rebuild something. So, if we think of the metaphor of the phoenix rising from the ashes, we have an opportunity to really create and revamp the research ecosystem. Because again, those who were in research spaces prior to the last few years know that it was not a perfect system whatsoever. And reform of how research is done has been talked about for many years, possibly decades, that we know that this hyper-competitive culture and the commodification of research has fostered and fueled possible research misconduct practices, as well as, fueling brain drain and stress. Research is hyper competitive. It's a very stressful environment. There is growing concern, even, this concern again has existed for some time that there is exploitation of individuals who are in research. So revamping the system has been talked about for some time prior to the current chaos. But as the research infrastructure is being purposely dismantled, it gives us an opportunity to really rebuild into something we want. Now, I don't have all the answers to this. This is more to facilitate discussion, get on people's radar, and to really think, okay, what is the future that we want? And how do we step into that future? So let's talk about what I'm referring to the research ecosystem. Again, using big fancy terms. Essentially, what this means is if we think of research into similar as like a pond or a valley, we have a lot of systems in place. So, like a pond, we have the water that attracts the bugs, the fish, there's plant life, all interact with each other. A stress in one element is going to impact the entire system. So this is not a complete focus, this is more of a snapshot or way to diagram the research ecosystem. But essentially, what influences our research ecosystem, there are both external and internal influences. External influences include regulations, policies. Again, this is a big stressor currently within the United States, and that also connects to sponsors and funders. Research itself is very expensive, and for a long time, especially after post-World War II in the United States, the government funded quite a bit of research that not only had impact in the United States, but globally. And that funding helped shape research agendas because you're more likely to get money to do expensive research when funding sources would fund you. Okay, so that influences the type of research we do. We see that as well. Peer organizations, so medical associations, psychological associations, many professional associations connected to research also have agendas and perspectives and motivations to do this. So famously too, in the early 1900s, or excuse me, Yeah, in the early 1900s, the American Psychological Association started to have presidents that focused a lot on behavioral research, and then that behavioral research influenced what many psychologists were studying in the United States. And then, we have the birth of operant conditioning and behavioral sciences really pioneered from the American Psychological Association, emphasizing the importance of behavioral research. Again, another component is research participants, and this is very clear when we talk about research ethics. Yeah. We rely, especially a lot in the social sciences and biomedical research, we rely on human subjects who are willing to participate in research. In other words, people need to volunteer to be participants, and this is how we study human behavior or biomedical conditions, etc. If no one is willing to participate in research, then we have no research. Okay, that's important to remember. And then finally, too, publishers play a big role. This would be a much longer talk, but we know publishers, you know, is an element that's been trying to be revamped for some time. Open publishing sources, there's a lot of debate on whether or not that's what we envisioned it to be. Also, with the advent of AI, publishing right now is also going through a chaotic moment. In addition to internal influencers of our ecosystems connect to research teams, ethics committees within our organizations, as well as leadership of those organizations. So, as I alluded to, and for those who may not be in the know, and again, I don't want to emphasize the negative, but the current research ecosystem is kind of a dumpster fire. Now, that's a very American expression. When something is a dumpster fire, also a way to say shit show, which is again another American expression, it's not a pleasant sight. It's kind of embarrassing. It smells. And really, it means something is a mess. It doesn't, and it's a mess in a very embarrassing way. Okay, that's the best way I can describe a dumpster fire. It's trashy. That's another American expression. It's not good to be trashy in the United States. Okay, and a dumpster fire is trashy. So when we take a step back, even I notice myself of feeling some sort of rage talking about the current position, but this is an opportunity to really take a step back and look at research. And why I'm so passionate about the research is our lives have been greatly impacted by research. Okay. There's also a lot of pitfalls, and I will be the first to admit that. But even how I'm communicating through you now, through the internet, okay? Biological, advances, so much of our lives have been improved through the scientific method and through research. Losing that would have such a significant impact on lives and our daily life and just humanity in general. That doesn't mean there is not negative pitfalls of research for sure, and that's why research ethics is so vital in the conduction of research. But really, this is an element of we want to keep the research process going. So, what elements of the structure must be preserved? And again, to sound well, finding a way to say this without getting too political is that a targeting of, or excuse me, a specific element of research is trying to find fact, knowledge, and truth. Okay. And there's a lot of forces in play that want to discredit institutions that are based off fact, knowledge, and truth as a way to promote their own narrative and their own propagandic and politic agenda. This is why there's a growing attack on research institutions within the global system. And again, this is a pattern that has been seen time and time again throughout history of attacking knowledge institutions that are a possible threat to one's political propagandic ideology. So, what's important with research institutions is essentially we want to keep them around to help us understand how things work. And then with that, so there's this sense of openness, collaboration, relying on facts, etc. This is a structure we want to keep possibly. I also want to ask too, what other models should be emphasized? The hypercompetitiveness model and the commodification of research probably is not something we want to continue, but again, I don't necessarily have the solution to this. These are just some questions to think about. And then finally, research benefits from having a lot of collaboration and perspectives. So, a global research community, we want to have a research community that is not only resilient, but inclusive and then also possibly maximizes positive impact. So, again, to really kind of question too, what can we come from this possibility? We want to reflect on what's the purpose of research. So, really reflecting on too, why do we do research? For many of research professionals, it is a way how we make a career out of this. We've invested a lot of time in developing our research skills. That's what is vital to remember, and why we have to be concerned about individuals leaving research fields is the amount of investment in time to really make someone who is competent and adequate to engage in research. It takes multiple years to understand and effectively do research. Research is complicated. There's a lot of processes to know and to play. So really we have to understand too that because of how we do research, to understand and really question and use scientific methods, knowledge is needed to engage in that process. With that as well, we also need to understand that many people who have become researchers didn't do it for the money or the fame or etc., but we did it because there is a passion to understand something. When I work with researchers, a lot of times we start with the question of like, why do you do this? Like, what got you interested in research? And many people share stories of being, in their childhood, of being curious about something, whether it's using a magnifying glass to study ants as they crawl up a tree, and that made someone interested in biology, being really curious of why friends act a certain way at lunch, maybe influence psychology, or is trying to understand, why a pencil falls when you let it go, understanding gravity and physics. There is a curiosity component to this. So really reflecting on why research is so important, it really connects to this curiosity and trying to understand something and use that understanding to solve something, usually to make something better. So we also want to embrace quality over quantity. Because of the research system has been really commodified through publications and funding sources. Quantity, that classic publish or perish mentality, is probably not effective. And there's more and more research that has shown that this leads to burnout, this leads to possibly increased research misconduct, and this also possibly leads to brain drain experience that one's feeling. So we want to emphasize quality of research, research that's done well. Well done research is going to have a greater impact than research that is done just to have another citation or a publication to one's name. So we're going to embrace quality. And embracing quality is probably going to be requiring new outcome structures. And again, this question has come up for some time of how do we revamp a promotional system that has relied a lot on using metrics such as publication and journal impact factor, etc., and then really emphasize the quality of research. When we look at quality, though, we know that sometimes it's hard to measure quality of something, and there's a lot of subjective components. So this is something we still have questions of how this would look. And then again, questioning, like I've talked about throughout this presentation, the commodification and hypercompetitiveness of the research ecosystem. So, the core mindset of a new possibility for our revamped ecosystem is again really emphasizing the ethical, responsible, and high quality research. If we engage in that, that's going to help with public trust. And if we have public trust, more likely people are going to be supportive of research, and then people are also going to be more willing to participate. In addition to, we want to really emphasize that research is a process that needs innovation and creativity. Okay. Unfortunately, there's a trend now where people are using AI to generate the research hypothesis, design, and their method they're going to utilize. That's all fine and dandy, but really the thing with research is it's a process. It's non-linear, it is more chaotic. Unfortunately, though, people who have not engaged in research don't understand how serendipitous things can be. It is a process, and through that process, new things and new innovations are discovered. So we really want to embrace that component. And again, to conduct high quality research, we need environments that are both safe, supportive, and relationship focused. Research is a team component, and the more effective the team is, the more effective the research will be. So, call to a venture. Again, how can we continue this conversation? How can we really try to understand, okay, what future do we want for our research ecosystem? What other possibilities can be identified? I have not covered them all, nor am I even capable of covering them all, but really understand what type of possibilities do we want? And then finally, how do we foster those possibilities into becoming reality? These are my references, so I'm going to end there. Thank you all for your time.